Okaeri! Welcome back to my channel, Made Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we're going to be starting a new series on my channel about Japanese mythology and Japanese yokai. I haven't exactly decided what I'm going to call this series yet, but this is going to be the first video, and I'm super excited to get started with it. So on Twitter, I had a poll where I asked you guys to vote as to whether you wanted me to do a video all in Japanese or a video in English about Japan, because a lot of my viewers have expressed interest in my life here or in Japanese culture or in the language, and I would love to interweave that. Interweave? I think that's a word. That. So, since we're all here for the love of stories, in whatever form they come in, I wanted to start a series where I tell Japanese stories. Now, in the West, or at least in America, we're quite familiar with Greek mythology or Grimm's fairy tales, and familiar with the creatures that come from those types of stories, more European-based. But not many people really know about Asian mythology or Asian creatures. And while I certainly can't speak for all Asian countries, I do live in Japan, so I thought it would be really fun to share the knowledge I have and the knowledge that some of my friends have about these stories. I'm also going to include links in the description down below for any adaptations of these stories I can find, or any resources that I think would be helpful, like story collections or really any media. So any movies, any TV shows, or obviously this is a booktube channel, so any books that would enable you to figure out more about whatever story that you find interesting. So for my first episode, I thought that I would do one of the quintessential Japanese stories, which is the tale of Kaguya Hime, or Princess Kaguya. This story is also called, I believe, the Tale of the Bamboo Cutter as well, so you might see both of those names around. So this story is about an old man who is walking through a bamboo forest, and he sees a bamboo stalk, a bamboo tree, that is glowing from the inside out. So he decides to cut the bamboo to see what's inside. And when he cuts it, it's revealed that there's a little teeny tiny, I think the original story says 3 centimeters, so really small little girl inside the bamboo. He decides to take her home, and him and his elderly wife, so it's an elderly couple, take care of her. And she grows very rapidly, so clearly there's a magical element here. But I think it's in, like, the original story I think says in 3 months she grows into a woman, and a beautiful woman at that. And since she's so beautiful, men from all over Japan, including the emperor, come to ask for her hand in marriage. But she's not going to give it away like that, so she asks all of the suitors to bring her impossible gifts. They call it takaramono, so treasures. And they're impossible to get, essentially. But of course they try, and some suitors come back with like fake versions of those gifts, but no one is actually able to succeed in getting the gifts that she asks for. Then one day, Kaguya Hime is looking at the moon, and she looks really, really sad. So her grandparents, the elderly man and woman, they ask her, "Why do you look so sad?" And she says, "Well, actually, I am a child of the moon. I'm from the moon, and I have to return there." And of course, her grandparents don't want her to go. They love her, and she doesn't want to go either, but she has to return home. The emperor also doesn't want her to return home, and they try to attack the moon, I believe, to keep her from returning, but they are unsuccessful. So in the end, she returns back to the moon, and everyone is sad, and that's the end of the story. Lots of Japanese stories are sad. This one's not so bad, but a lot of them are pretty heartbreaking. So it's not so shocking to hear a sadder ending to this. But this is like a quintessential story. It's considered one of Japan's oldest, if not the oldest, tale. And because of that, its influence is pretty easy to see nowadays. There are more concrete examples, such as in the anime and the manga Inuyasha. I'll put a picture up here. But this main character, his clothing, the red clothing that he's wearing, is actually one of the treasures or the impossible gifts that Kaguya asked her suitors to get her. So it's kind of a callback or a reference to the story of Kaguya Hime, to have that in the manga and in the anime. Also, women in Japan are very closely associated with the moon. Now, in my research, haven't been able to find out if this was because of Kaguya Hime or this existed before that, but it's pretty clear that there's a connection between women and the moon in this country. I'm sure you've heard of Sailor Moon, right? So it's a bunch of women warriors and their princess lives on the moon. There's also a phrase in Japanese called tsuki ga kirei, and this means the moon is beautiful. And I can't remember the name of the author right now. I'll put his name up on the screen. But there's a Japanese author who translated the phrase I love you into tsuki ga kirei because Japanese society is seen to be very shy. And being direct is not something that is done often here. So to directly say, I love you would be too embarrassing for Japanese people, this author believed. So he translated that phrase to be, the moon is beautiful. And while I haven't seen any definitive confirmation of this is my theory, but I think this comes from women being closely associated with the moon. So obviously, in this day and age, it's not just men confessing to, women saying, I love you. But if we go with the traditional values that this was created along the lines of, then I think that it makes sense. Although, if my boyfriend were to say, the moon is beautiful, I'd be like, yeah, I guess it is. Like, that ain't gonna cut it for me. But I do think that that's a really interesting part of Japanese culture that clearly has a connection to Kaguya Hime in this original story. There was also a movie made by Studio Ghibli in 2013. The director was not Hayao Miyazaki, so it's not the director is not the person who created Spirited Away or Princess Mononoke, or those really famous Ghibli films, but it was a different director. Again, I'll put their name on the screen here. But it got amazing reviews, and it was a retelling of Kaguya Hime. And I haven't seen it, but I really want to. So maybe after making this video, I'm gonna put that high on my list to consume. Maybe this weekend I can watch it. And maybe I can leave like a little mini review in the description down below if I watch it. But I'll definitely include the link to that information down below. There's also an old TV series called Manga Nippon Mukashi Banashi, and it is a really old school cartoon series that tells old Japanese stories. Now it is in Japanese, so if you don't speak Japanese, I'm not sure if there's a translated version out there, but I will include the link to the Kaguya Hime version that they have, and it's a really, nostalgic feel. So I think it would be a really good place to see the story visually. So depending on where you're watching from, I'm really curious if you have that connection between women or beauty and love and the moon in your culture. Because in America, I don't really think we have that. Correct me if I'm wrong if you're American and you have that kind of image in your head, but for me, it's more Halloween, werewolves, kind of like, not just scary, but definitely not a super romantic view of it. But if your culture does have that type of connection, I'd love to hear about it because I find it so fascinating, the different meaning that different cultures put on symbols. So let me know down below if you like this video, if you like this style video. I really enjoyed doing the research for this, and I would really like to continue the series if you guys enjoy it. Words are powerful, as I think all of us here on BookTube know, and I find mythology and the words that form the basis of different cultures to be so interesting to study and to talk about and discuss. So while I'm sharing some of the Japanese myths on this series or on my channel, I would love if you could share in the comments down below anything from your culture. Is there anything similar to Kaguya Hime that you know of, or is this the first time you've heard this story? Just let's chat in the comments down below. Thank you guys for watching this. I know this is kind of different content than I usually make, but I hope you enjoy it. If you do, click that like button. Let me know that you enjoyed it. But I'm gonna head out for now. Done.